She was standing in the doorway of my childhood home, arms crossed, watching me pack my things into a trash bag. And she was smiling. Not a small smile. Not even the kind of smile people try to hide when they're pretending to feel bad. It was wide and slow and satisfied, like she'd been waiting years for this exact moment. Maybe she had. "You have until noon," my stepmother said. Her name was Lorraine, and she had married my father 3 years before he died. 3 years. That's all it took for her to become the sole heir to everything he'd built over a lifetime. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? The will had been read that morning in a downtown Portland law office. Dark wood paneling, a pitcher of water nobody touched, my stepmother's attorney doing most of the talking. My father's estate, the house, the investment portfolio, the 2 commercial properties he owned in the Pearl District, the lake cabin up near Astoria. All of it went to Lorraine. I received one line. "To my son, Thomas, I leave my personal effects and my gratitude for his understanding." His gratitude for my understanding. I was 23 years old. My father was dead, and I was standing in the hallway of the house I grew up in, stuffing a garbage bag with whatever I could grab before noon. My half-brother, Lorraine's son from her first marriage, stood at the top of the stairs watching me. His name was Preston, and he was 26, and he had the kind of look on his face that told me he already knew which bedroom he was taking. He didn't say a word either. He just watched. I thought about my father the whole drive away from that house. He had built his software company from a spare bedroom in Northeast Portland when I was 4 years old. By the time I was in middle school, it was a real business. By high school, he was selling licensing deals to firms in Seattle and San Francisco. He wasn't a household name, but he was comfortable, more than comfortable. He took me fishing every summer up in the Cascades. He taught me to drive in the Safeway parking lot on Burnside. He called me every Sunday after I left for college, without fail, even when I missed the call and had to call him back on Monday. He was not a man who would cut his only son out of everything. That's what I kept thinking. That's what I couldn't let go of. He died of a heart attack. That was the official cause. He was 57, which the doctors said was unusual but not impossible for someone with his history. Except I had never known my father to have any heart history. He hiked. He watched what he ate. His own doctor had told him at his last physical that his numbers looked great. I was there for that appointment. I remember the doctor shaking his hand. The heart attack happened on a Tuesday night. Lorraine found him. She called 911 after, by her account, attempting CPR for several minutes. He was gone by the time the paramedics arrived. I didn't let myself think too hard about any of that. Not yet. I wasn't ready to go where that train of thought led. What I focused on instead was finding somewhere to sleep. I ended up on my college roommate's couch in Southeast Portland for the first 2 weeks. Then a buddy from work let me crash in his spare room. I had some savings, not much, maybe $4,000, and a job doing IT support for a mid-sized accounting firm that paid me enough to cover the basics if I was careful. I told myself I was fine. I told myself I would figure it out. Then, about 3 weeks after the funeral, I got a letter. It came in a plain white envelope, hand-addressed. No return address, just a Portland postmark. Inside was a single index card with a name and address written in handwriting I didn't recognize. At the bottom of the card, one sentence. "Your father asked me to give you this. He said you'd know what to do." The name on the card was a law firm, not the one that had handled the estate. A different one, smaller, on the west side near Washington Park. I drove over the next morning. The attorney's name was Mr. Holt. He was in his late 60s, quiet, wore reading glasses on a chain. He didn't shake my hand dramatically or explain things in a way that felt like a movie. He just sat down across from me, opened a desk drawer, and slid an envelope across the table. "Your father came to see me 14 months ago," he said. He was very specific about the conditions under which this was to be delivered. He said it was only to be given to you directly, in person, after the estate proceedings were concluded. I stared at the envelope. My name was written on the front in my father's handwriting. That was the first time I cried since the funeral. "He also asked me to tell you one thing," Mr. Holt said. He said, "Don't go to anyone local. go straight to the federal level. I didn't understand that. Not yet. Inside the envelope was a small brass key, the kind that opens a padlock, old-fashioned and worn smooth at the edges, and a folded piece of paper with an address. The address was in Vernonia, Oregon, a rural town about an hour northwest of Portland, up in the Coast Range, timber country. And then a handwritten note, 3 sentences from my father. Thomas, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you in person. There wasn't time, and I couldn't risk it being found. The key opens the workshop in the garage. Look under the floorboard near the east window. Trust nobody until you've seen it. I sat in my car outside the law office for a long time. I read those 3 sentences about 8 times. Then I started driving. The address led me out of the city on Highway 26, then north on back roads that wound through logged hillsides and small farms. I passed a hardware store, a diner with 3 trucks in the parking lot, a grain elevator. The GPS took me down a gravel road that I almost turned around on twice because I was certain I'd made a wrong turn. But then I crested a small hill and saw it. A property, a few acres, mostly overgrown, blackberry vines along the fence line, tall grass in the field, a stand of Douglas fir along the back edge. There was a single-story house set back from the road, white siding gone gray with age and weather, one shutter hanging crooked at the front window, and behind it, a detached garage, bigger than the house expected, with a rusted metal roof and double wooden doors padlocked shut. I sat in my car in the gravel driveway for a moment. A crow landed on the fence post. The whole place was so quiet I could hear the wind moving through the fir trees. I had not known this place existed. My father owned this, and in 23 years, he had never mentioned it. Not once. I thought I knew everything about him. I thought we were close. Standing there on that gravel, I felt something shift in my chest. Not grief exactly. More like the first tremor of understanding that I had not been seeing the full picture. The house was unlocked. Inside it was dusty and spare. Some old furniture, a wood stove, a shelf of paperbacks. It looked like a hunting cabin or a fishing retreat, except there were no trophies on the walls, no gear in the corners. Just a place where someone had occasionally stayed, a place where no one would think to look for anything. I went to the garage. The padlock opened on the first try. The doors swung outward and the smell hit me. Sawdust and motor oil and old wood, the smell of my father's hands when I was a kid, and he used to build things on weekends before the company took over his life. Inside was a workbench along one wall, some hand tools hung on pegboard, a few shelves of hardware, a normal workshop. Nothing unusual at all. I almost missed it. The east window was grimy, barely letting in light. I crouched near it and looked at the floorboard, and at first I couldn't tell which one. Then I saw it. One board was slightly shorter than the others, its end not quite flush with the wall. I got my fingers under it and pried up. Underneath was a metal fireproof box, the kind you can buy at any Home Depot, matte black, about the size of a shoebox. It wasn't locked. I lifted the lid. There was a USB drive, a small notebook, spiral-bound, and a sealed envelope with 2 words on the front. Read first. My hands were not steady. I sat down on the workshop floor with my back against the workbench and opened the envelope. My father wrote like he talked, direct, a little formal, no wasted words. He explained that he had been worried for about 18 months before he died. He had discovered, by accident, that his company's financial records had been manipulated. Not by an outsider, by someone he trusted. His business attorney, a man named Garfield, who had been with him for over a decade, had been quietly diverting funds into shell accounts, small amounts at first, then larger ones, working with a third party my father had not yet fully identified. When my father confronted Garfield indirectly, feeling out the situation without showing his hand, he noticed a change in Lorraine's behavior within days. That was when he began to understand the shape of it. He wrote, "I don't know how long they have been in contact, or what was promised to her, but I know that Lorraine was told I was investigating. After that, I felt I could not trust the safety of information in any place she had access to." He had spent the following weeks quietly documenting everything he could. Bank statements, wire transfer records, correspondence he had accessed without Garfield's knowledge. He had burned a copy of everything onto the USB drive. He had brought it here, to this property that he had purchased quietly, in cash, through a private transaction years before he married Lorraine. She did not know it existed. It was not in any document she had access to. He wrote, "I tried to protect you by keeping you outside of this. I was afraid involving you would put you in danger. If you are reading this, then I ran out of time. I'm sorry, Thomas. I should have told you sooner. I didn't want to frighten you until I was certain. I became certain too late. I sat on that workshop floor for a long time. I thought about the heart attack, the Tuesday night, the paramedics arriving too late. I thought about what it meant that he had told me to go federal, not local. Federal. I didn't let myself fall apart. I thought about my father hiking in the Cascades, calling me every Sunday, shaking his doctor's hand in that exam room. I thought about the smirk on Preston's face at the top of the stairs. I thought about Lorraine watching me pack my trash bag. Then I put the notebook and the USB drive in my jacket pocket, put the fireproof box back under the floorboard, replaced the board, closed the garage, snapped the padlock shut, and drove back down the gravel road. I was about halfway down the hill when a black SUV came up the road toward me. It slowed as we passed each other. The windows were tinted. I kept my eyes forward and my speed even and told myself it was nothing. A neighbor, a hunter, someone checking on a property. I watched it in my rearview mirror. It turned into the gravel driveway I had just left. My mouth went dry. I kept driving. I did not speed up. I turned onto the main road and put 3 miles between me and that driveway before I let out the breath I'd been holding. They had known where to look, which meant they had been watching, which meant I was right about everything, and I had less time than I thought. I drove back to Portland without stopping. That night, in my buddy's spare room, I plugged the USB drive into my laptop and spent 4 hours going through the files. It was meticulous. My father had been thorough. Years of documentation, wire transfers going back nearly 2 years, correspondence between Garfield and what appeared to be a financial consultant who was serving as the middleman for the shell accounts. There were records that appeared to link Lorraine to at least 3 direct communications with Garfield in the month before my father died. There was also a single audio file, 22 minutes long. I put in my earbuds and listened to it once. Then I sat very still. My father had recorded a phone call. It was Garfield's voice and Lorraine's voice, and they were discussing the timeline. They were discussing what would happen after. They used careful language, nothing quite explicit enough to be a smoking gun on its own. But the meaning was clear. They were not planning for my father's survival. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I followed my father's instructions. I didn't go to the Portland Police Bureau. I didn't call the Oregon State Police. I went straight to the Portland field office of the FBI. I understand if that sounds like something out of a movie. It felt like something out of... I sat in a gray waiting room for 2 hours with a paper visitor badge clipped to my jacket and a USB drive in my pocket, and I just kept breathing, one breath at a time. The agent who came to see me was a woman named Special Agent Deering. She was composed and professional and did not react much when I started talking, which actually helped me stay calm. I laid it all out: the letter, the property in Vernonia, the fireproof box, the documentation, the audio file. I gave her the USB drive. I told her what my father had written about going federal. She listened. She asked precise, specific questions. At the end, she said, "We'll need to verify the materials, but I want you to understand, if what you're telling me checks out, this is significant." She was right. It did check out. I won't pretend I was privy to every step of the investigation that followed. I was a witness and a complainant, not an investigator. There were months of silence in which I went to work, slept on my buddy's couch, and tried to function. My father's attorney, Garfield, was placed under investigation within weeks of my visit to the field office. Lorraine's financial accounts were subpoenaed. Preston, as it turned out, had known nothing, or at least could not be proven to have known anything, and seemed genuinely stunned when the situation became clear to him. The estate proceedings were challenged on the basis of fraud and undue influence. The original will, the real one, The one my father had written with a different attorney before he met Lorraine was located in a safe deposit box at a bank in Beaverton. Apparently, my father had filed it away years before and simply never updated it because he had trusted Garfield to handle everything. Garfield had suppressed it. That will left the company and primary assets to me. The legal process took almost a year. There were hearings and depositions and documents I had to sign in triplicate in conference rooms that all looked identical to me by the end. At one point, Lorraine's defense team argued that the audio file was inadmissible. It was admitted. At one point, Garfield's attorneys argued that the wire transfers were standard business expenses. They were not. Garfield was convicted on 11 counts of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. He received an 8-year federal sentence. Lorraine was convicted of 3 counts related to conspiracy and financial fraud and received 4 years, of which she would likely serve a portion. Her attorney made a plea arrangement. I was not asked my opinion on the arrangement, but I was told about it. Preston moved out of my father's house before I ever moved back in. I don't know where he went. I didn't ask. The first morning I walked back through the front door of my childhood home, I sat down on the floor of the entryway, the same place I had stood with my trash bag, and I just put my head down for a minute. Not crying, just breathing, just being in that space again and feeling the weight of everything it had taken to get back to it. I kept the house. I kept the company, though I brought in a management team to run the day-to-day because software licensing was not exactly what I had gone to school for. I kept the lake cabin near Astoria. The property in Vernonia I handled differently. I went back out there a few weeks after everything was settled, walked the property in the morning light, through the tall grass, and along the fence line where the blackberries were going dormant for winter. I went into the workshop and stood at the east window, the one that had barely let in any light the first time I was there. I fixed the roof first, then the doors. Then I cleaned the whole place out, painted the interior, put in better windows. I built a long workbench along the south wall and hung my father's old hand tools, the ones I had found in a box in the Portland house, on a new pegboard above it. I put a wood stove in the corner of the main room and a good reading chair next to it. I go out there on weekends sometimes, mostly in the fall, when the firs change and the mist comes in off the hills. I bring coffee and a book and I sit in that chair by the wood stove and I think about my father, not the way he died, not the year I spent fighting to get back what was his, but the way he used to build things on weekends, his hands smelling of sawdust and motor oil, that quiet, focused look he had when he was making something out of nothing. He hid the truth in the last place anyone would think to look. He trusted me to find it. He was right to trust me. I think about that a lot, how the worst year of my life started in a law office with a will that wasn't real and ended in a federal courtroom where the real one was read aloud into the record. How I was handed a trash bag and a brass key, and one turned out to matter a great deal more than the other. My father built something once out of a spare bedroom and a good idea and a willingness to keep going when things were hard. I'm still learning how to do that, but I have more time now and a workbench and the tools he left me. That's enough to start.